children, Maunika is back. Previously, we've learned about states of matter and particles of matter. Now, without getting late, let us gather more information on properties of matter. Before that, let us focus on learning objectives. Learning outcomes. After studying this topic, you will be able to know diffusion, force of attraction, dissolving, keywords, diffusion, force of attraction, dissolving. In solids, the particles are closely packed. There is a strong force of attraction between the particles of a solid, which holds them together in fixed positions. The positions of particles in a solid are fixed. They cannot move from one position to another. The gaps or distances between the particles of a solid are very, very small. A solid has a fixed shape and volume and does not fill the container completely. Because the particles of a solid are closely packed and their positions are fixed due to the strong forces of attraction between them. That's why a solid does not flow as a liquid gas does. In liquids, the particles are close together, but they are not as close as in solids. The particles are loosely packed in liquids. The gaps between the particles of a liquid are more than that in a solid, but they are still very small. There is a force of attraction between the particles of a liquid that holds them together. But the force is not strong enough to hold the particles in fixed positions. The positions of particles in a liquid are not fixed and can move freely. A liquid takes the shape of its container as the position of particles are not fixed. A liquid has a fixed volume because the gaps between its particles are fixed. A liquid does not fill its container completely because its particles are held fairly strongly by the forces. A liquid generally flows easily. In gases, the particles are much farther apart from one another as compared to solids and liquids. The gaps or distances between the particles of a gas are very large. The force of attraction between the particles of a gas is very small. The position of particles of a gas and the gaps between the particles of a gas are not fixed. When a gas is put in an empty container, it quickly spreads throughout the container and fills it completely. A gas does not have a fixed shape and volume because the position of its particles are not fixed. Since the particles of a gas are free to move anywhere, it takes the shape and volume of its container. A gas flows easily because its particles are completely free to move anywhere. When we burn an incense stick and keep it in a corner of a room, a smell of the burning incense stick reaches everywhere in the room. The particles of the smoke coming out of the stick move and spreads everywhere. The spreading out and mixing of matter with another matter due to the motion of particles is called diffusion. Let us take an example of diffusion. When a gas jar is empty, it is actually filled with air. This is because since the air is colorless, we cannot see it in the gas jar. Bromine is a red-brown liquid. It forms vapors easily. Bromine vapor is red-brown in color and it is heavier than air. A gas jar containing air is placed upside down and a jar of bromine vapor is poured. After pouring the bromine vapor, it mixes with the air. Diffusion is a property of matter which is based on the motion of particles. Diffusion occurs in gases, liquids and solids. Diffusion is fastest in gases and slowest in solids. Diffusion tells us that the particles of matter are constantly moving. The diffusion of gases is very fast. This is because the particle in gases move very quickly in all directions. The smell of food being cooked in the kitchen reaches us even from a considerable distance. When a food is cooked, some of the substances in food releases gases having the smell of food in them. The particles of these gases move very quickly and mix up with air by diffusion. Diffusion in liquids is slower than that in gases. This is because the particles in liquids move slowly as compared to the particles in gases. A crystal of potassium permanganate is placed at the bottom of the water in a beaker. Then the purple color of potassium permanganate spreads into the whole water slowly. Diffusion can also take place in solids. Diffusion in solids is a very slow process. If we write something on a blackboard and leave it uncleaned for at least 10 to 15 days, it becomes quite difficult to clean the blackboard afterwards. The diffusion in solids is very slow because the particles in solids do not move from their fixed positions. What happens when you add sugar to water and stir it? It vanishes after some time. This vanishing of sugar in water is called the dissolving of sugar. When sugar is dissolved in water, its crystals break into very fine particles. These particles of sugar go into the gaps between the particles of water, due to which there is no change in the volume of water on dissolving sugar in it. If we take a piece of chalk, a cube of ice, and an iron nail, and beat them with a hammer, we will find that it is very easy to break the piece of chalk into small particles. It requires more force to break a cube of ice. The iron nail does not break at all, even with a large force. This shows that the force attraction between the particles of chalk is quite weak. The force of attraction between the particles of ice is a bit stronger, whereas the force of attraction between the particles of iron nail is very strong. The force of attraction is maximum in the particles of solid matter and minimum in the particles of gaseous matter. Points to remember.